My name is Laura, and I grew up in a regular family. My parents made decent money, but we weren't rich. I had an older brother, 6 years older than me, and he was the favorite. Our parents sent him to a fancy private school with everything you could imagine, while I went to the local public school. It wasn't bad, but the difference was huge. I remember when I was about 9 years old, I watched a music video of an amazing singer. I got so excited and ran to my mom. "Mom, can I take singing lessons, please?" I asked. She looked at me like I was crazy. "Singing lessons, Laura? Don't be silly. That's just a hobby. You need to focus on getting a real job when you grow up." My dad added, "Your brother is the smart one in the family. You'll have to work with your hands, sweetie. No point wasting money on singing lessons." I was disappointed, but I didn't give up. I started looking up singing lessons online and practiced in my room, trying to stay quiet so my parents wouldn't get mad. But still, I often heard, "Laura, stop that noise." Things might have stayed the same if not for my Aunt Emma. She was my mom's sister, had no kids, and worked as a dentist. She made good money, and for some reason, she actually liked spending time with me. One day, she heard me singing in my room. I felt embarrassed, but she just smiled and said, "Laura, that was beautiful. Why didn't you tell me you could sing?" I shrugged, my face turning red. "Mom and Dad say it's silly," I mumbled. Aunt Emma's face changed, like she was trying not to frown. "Well, I think it's amazing. How about we get you some real lessons?" From that day on, everything changed. Aunt Emma became my biggest supporter. She bought me a small keyboard, and we spent hours learning songs together. It felt like a whole new world had opened up for me. When my parents found out about my singing lessons, they weren't happy. Mom even had the nerve to tell Aunt Emma, "You should be giving that money to our son instead." But Aunt Emma just smiled calmly and said, "I think Laura has real talent. I'm happy to support her." That was the first time someone had stood up for me like that. It made me feel noticed, like maybe I wasn't just the family disappointment after all. While I was struggling to keep up with my singing lessons, my brother was living the good life. One day, he came home all excited. "Mom, Dad, I want to play hockey," he announced at dinner. I almost choked on my food. Just last month, it was tennis. Before that, it was US football. And don't even get me started on his short rugby phase. Did our parents hesitate? Nope. Dad just nodded and said, "Sure, son. We'll sign you up tomorrow." No surprise, hockey didn't last either. Just like all the other sports, he quit after a while. My brother jumped from one thing to another, never really getting good at anything. Then came the esports phase. "Oh boy. I need a gaming computer," he said one day. "A really good one. And my own room for training and competitions." I thought, this is it. Mom and Dad are finally going to say no. But no, they just nodded like little bobbleheads. "Of course, honey," Mom said. "We'll set everything up for you." And they did. They turned the guest room into his personal gaming space. The computer they bought him cost more than all my clothes put together. Meanwhile, I was still sharing a room and playing music on a second-hand keyboard from my cousins. The worst part? The wall of fame in our living room. It was this huge display of all my brother's so-called achievements. There were participation certificates from every sport he quit, awards from his fancy private school, and even a Best Smile certificate from his third-grade yearbook. And me? Not a single thing. Not even a tiny space for my straight A's or the singing competition I had won at school. Things really got bad when it was time for college. Of course, my brother got into a top Ivy League school. Mom and Dad were over the moon. They paid for everything, his tuition, a fancy apartment off campus, a new car, the works. 5 years passed. I focused on my singing, on school, on anything to distract myself from how unfair it all felt. Through it all, Aunt Emma was my rock. She always had a kind word or a new song for me to learn. Then one sunny afternoon, my brother burst through the front door. He had a girl with him, giggling and clinging to his arm. "Mom, Dad," he shouted. "I've got news," my brother announced. Mom and Dad came running like always. They were always ready to drop everything for him. "This is Patricia," he said, smiling like he had just won the lottery. We got married last week. She's moving in with us. I thought Mom was going to faint from happiness. Dad started talking about making more space, maybe even turning the attic into another room. While everyone fussed over the happy couple, I quietly slipped away to my room. I had a bad feeling about what was coming next. And I was right. The next month felt like I was living in a different world. Mom and Dad were all over my brother and his new wife. They redecorated his room, bought new furniture, and even talked about building an extension to the house. Meanwhile, I felt more invisible than ever. I tried to focus on my future. I had graduated high school with honors, not that anyone noticed, and I was looking at a small college with a good singing program. It wasn't fancy, but it was something. I knew Mom and Dad had saved some money for my college. It wasn't a lot, but it would cover the basics. At least, that's what I thought. One morning, about a month after my brother and Patricia moved in, Mom and Dad called me into the living room. The moment I saw their faces, I knew something was wrong. "Laura," Dad started, his voice stiff and serious. "We need to talk about your future. We've decided to use your college fund to cover your living expenses for the past 19 years. I blinked. I must have heard that wrong. What?
Dad didn't look at me.
You're an adult now. It's time for you to start paying your own way. The room started spinning. But what about college? I was counting on that money. Mom's face turned cold. Your brother is married now. He needs more space and money for his family. We're giving him your room. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So what? I'm just supposed to leave? Where am I supposed to go? You'll need to find a job and a place to live, Dad said like it was no big deal. You won't be able to afford college without money. Something inside me snapped. For the first time, I felt real, burning anger toward my parents. You can't do this. I'm your daughter. This is my home too. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mom stormed out of the room. I thought maybe she was thinking it over, that maybe they would reconsider. But she came back with a suitcase. Fine, she said angrily. If you won't leave, I'll pack for you. She started grabbing my things, throwing them carelessly into the suitcase. I stood there, frozen in shock. That's when I noticed my brother and Patricia standing in the doorway, watching with smug smiles on their faces. Something inside me broke. This wasn't my family. These weren't the people who were supposed to love and support me. I pushed past Mom and started packing my own things. I grabbed my clothes, my few pieces of jewelry, and, most importantly, the music books and recordings Aunt Emma had given me over the years. Nobody said a word. Nobody tried to stop me. And when I walked out the front door, dragging my suitcase behind me, nobody called me back. I found myself standing in front of Aunt Emma's house, my whole life packed into one small suitcase. When she opened the door and saw my tear-streaked face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into a hug and said, "Oh, Laura, come in, sweetheart." That night, over a cup of hot cocoa, I told her everything. Aunt Emma listened, her face getting darker with each word. When I finished, she took my hand and squeezed it tight. "You're staying here," she said firmly. "And tomorrow, we're going to figure out your future." That night, I slept better than I had in years. I finally felt like I was somewhere I was wanted. The next morning, Aunt Emma surprised me. "I'm paying for your college," she announced over breakfast. "I've been saving for years, hoping to help you chase your dreams. That's what this money is for." Over the next few weeks, we researched colleges. Aunt Emma suggested I look for programs that combined singing and acting. "You've got a gift, Laura," she said. "Let's find a place where you can shine." We finally picked a performing arts college in a city a few hours away. It had a great reputation and the exact training I had always dreamed of. When the entrance exams came, Aunt Emma took time off work and drove me there herself. I sang my heart out, putting every bit of emotion into my performance. When I finished, the judges were silent for a moment. Then they broke into applause. A week later, I got my acceptance letter. I was in. From that moment on, I gave it my all. I threw myself into my studies, every class, every rehearsal, every late-night practice. I signed up for every singing competition I could find. I performed in every amateur theater production that would have me. If there was a part in a musical, no matter how small, I took it. I was on that stage, giving my all during my audition. Before I knew it, 5 years had passed. I graduated with honors, and my final showcase performance got a standing ovation. And that's when everything changed. A talent scout from a big musical theater company was in the audience that night. After the show, he rushed over, talking fast about my talent and all the opportunities waiting for me. The next thing I knew, I was signing a contract with one of the biggest names in the business. Suddenly, I wasn't just performing in college plays or small local theaters. I was on real stages, in front of real audiences, playing lead roles in professional musicals. It was exciting. It was scary. It was everything I had ever wanted. Through it all, Aunt Emma was there for me. She came to every performance she could, always sitting in the front row, always the first to stand and clap when the show ended. After every performance, we'd go for late-night pancakes. She'd talk about every little detail of my performance, beaming with pride. And that's when I realized something. This woman, who didn't have to take care of me, had given me more love and support than my own parents ever had. She wasn't just my aunt anymore. She was the mom I had always wished for. Life was going great. I had just landed a lead role in a new musical that was getting a lot of attention. One afternoon, I stopped by Aunt Emma's house, bursting with excitement about my future. "Aunt Emma, you won't believe what's happening," I said, telling her all about my upcoming projects. She smiled warmly, listening like she always did. But just as I was about to leave, she said something that shocked me. "Laura," she said gently, "you've grown into such a wonderful young woman. Don't you think it's time to make peace with your parents? They're still your family." I wanted to argue. After everything they had done to me, why should I? But the hope in Aunt Emma's eyes stopped me. After all she had done for me, how could I say no? "Okay," I said, not really wanting to. "I'll try." The next day, I stood outside my parents' house, feeling like a stranger. Mom opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise. "Laura," she said, like she wasn't sure it was really me. "Hi, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "Can I come in?" They let me stay, but I could tell I wasn't really welcome. The house felt different. Colder somehow. And guess what? My brother was still living there. Apparently, his wife had been kicked out. Mom mumbled something about Patricia playing video games all day and refusing to help out or get a job. I put up with their cold silence and judgmental looks. I was just about ready to leave when my brother cornered me in the kitchen. He smirked. "So, still chasing that silly singing dream? Let me guess, you're performing in some cheap little bar now." Something inside me snapped. I stood up straight, looked him in the eye, and said, "Actually, I'm the lead singer in several successful musicals, and I'm doing quite well for myself. Thank you." You should have seen their faces. It was like someone had flipped a switch. Suddenly, Mom and Dad couldn't stop asking questions. "Musicals? Really?" Dad asked. "How much do you make?" I tried to leave, but Mom blocked the door. "You must be making good money," she insisted. "How much is your contract worth?" "That's private," I said, trying to step past her. Dad's face turned serious. "Now listen here, young lady. After everything we've done for you, you owe us. We're your parents. You're supposed to help us and your brother." And just like that, I felt like I was 19 again, standing in the same house, being told I wasn't worth investing in. But this time, I wasn't that scared, insecure girl anymore. I looked them in the eye and said, "I don't owe you anything. You kicked me out, remember? You told me I wasn't worth supporting. Well, guess what? I made it without you. And I don't need you now." I walked out and went straight to Aunt Emma's house. She took one look at my face and opened her arms. As I hugged her, I knew this was my real family. This was home. But life has a cruel way of taking away happiness when you least expect it. Everything was going great. I was performing in sold-out shows every night, living my dream. Then I got the call that changed everything. Aunt Emma had cancer. The world seemed to stop spinning. I wanted to drop everything and rush to her side, but she wouldn't let me. "Your dreams are my dreams too," she told me over the phone, her voice weaker than I had ever heard it. Don't you dare give them up for me. So, I kept performing. But every free moment I had, I spent with her. We'd sit in her garden, talking about everything and nothing. I tried to memorize every detail, her face, her laugh, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. But cancer is cruel. Despite the treatments, despite our hopes and prayers, Aunt Emma got worse. And then one day, while I was in the middle of a tour, I got the call I had been dreading. Aunt Emma was gone. If anything about this could be called lucky, it was that I had a few days off between shows. I caught the first flight home, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed tight. As soon as the funeral was over, I had to fly back. The show must go on, as they say. But every performance felt empty. I sang the notes, hit my marks, but my heart wasn't in it. How could it be? It was shattered into a million pieces. When the tour finally ended, I came home exhausted and grieving. That's when I got a call from a notary. Aunt Emma had left a will, and I needed to come in to discuss it. I didn't really care what she had left me. Nothing could replace her. But when the notary started reading the will, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Aunt Emma had left me everything. Her house, her savings, all of it. I broke down crying right there in the office. In the days that followed, I moved into Aunt Emma's house. I was slowly starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, I could move forward. Then my past came knocking. Literally. One afternoon, there was loud pounding on the door. I opened it to find my brother standing there. He looked messy, tired, and desperate. I need money, he blurted out before I could even say hello. My wife's pregnant, and I left Mom and Dad. They've been driving me crazy with all their nagging. You've got to help me, Kimmy. I just stood there, stunned. After everything that had happened, this was how he talked to me? Why don't you get a job? I asked, trying to stay calm. His face twisted in disgust.
A job? I don't need a job.
I need money. You've got plenty now, don't you? That old lady left you everything. That old lady. My blood boiled. That old lady was more family to me than you ever were. I snapped. And no, I'm not giving you money. His eyes narrowed. You tricked her, didn't you? You fooled that sad old woman into giving you everything. You're nothing but a thief. I'll take you to court, you'll see. Something inside me exploded. All the grief, all the anger I had been holding in came rushing out. Get out, I shouted. Get out of my house right now. You want to take me to court? Go ahead. Try explaining to a judge why the sister you abandoned owes you anything. Go on. Do it. But get out of my house. I slammed the door in his face, my whole body shaking as I leaned against the closed door, my heart pounding. And then I realized something. This house, this inheritance, it wasn't just a gift. It was Aunt Emma's final act of love. Her way of protecting me, even after she was gone. Just when I thought the drama with my brother was over, my phone rang. It was my parents. I almost didn't answer, but for some reason, I pressed the green button. Laura, my mom's voice came through, sickly sweet. We heard about the inheritance. Don't you think you should share some of that with your family? After all, Emma was our relative too. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious right now? I asked, my voice cold. Now, Laura, my mom cooed. We're just saying family should help family.
You have so much now.
Surely, you can spare a little for us. That was it. The last straw. Family? I spat. You want to talk about family? Where was your family loyalty when you kicked me out? When you told me I wasn't worth supporting? When you chose my brother over me every single time? Silence. I wasn't done. Let me remind you of something, I continued, my voice shaking with anger. Aunt Emma left me everything because she believed in me when you didn't. She supported me when you abandoned me. You don't get to be family now just because it's convenient for you. I heard my mother gasp. Then my father's voice came through, cold and sharp. You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt lighter. Like I had finally said everything I had been holding in for years. But it wasn't over. Not even close. The next day, I started seeing posts on social media. My parents were on a warpath. They were posting long, dramatic stories about how I had stolen Aunt Emma's inheritance, how I was a selfish thief who couldn't even bother to organize a proper funeral for her. All lies, of course. The funeral had been beautiful, exactly what Aunt Emma would have wanted. But the truth didn't matter to them. They wanted revenge. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly flooded my inbox, calling me horrible names. Old acquaintances left nasty comments on my photos. It felt like the whole world was turning against me. Every day, there were new insults, new threats. And then my parents took it even further. They made fake profiles just to harass me. When I blocked their main accounts, my brother joined in. He started making up wild stories about how I had tricked a weak-old woman into giving me her money. Then I heard from others that my parents and brother were planning to sue me. They were looking for lawyers, trying to challenge Aunt Emma's will. For a moment, panic set in. What if they won? What if they took away Aunt Emma's final gift to me? I hired my own lawyer just in case. But in the end, I didn't need to worry. When I told my lawyer about the threats, he simply smiled. "They don't have a case," he said. "The will is solid. Your aunt was of sound mind when she wrote it, and her wishes were crystal clear. They can try to sue, but they'll lose. And they'll lose badly." Hearing that felt like a huge weight lifting off my shoulders. The law was on my side. Aunt Emma's wishes would be respected. The harassment didn't stop overnight, but knowing I was in the right gave me strength. I kept blocking accounts and reporting the worst messages. Slowly, things began to change. People started seeing the truth. Then, 3 years flew by in a blur of bright lights, standing ovations, and dreams coming true. I had become exactly what Aunt Emma always believed I could be, a successful musical actress. My face was on billboards. My voice filled theaters. I even appeared on TV. It all felt like a dream I never wanted to wake up from. Life was good. I was touring the world, singing on stages I had once only imagined. And every performance felt like a tribute to Aunt Emma, a way to honor her belief in me. Then, one night, everything changed. Again. I was back in my home state for a series of shows. It was a sold-out performance, the energy in the theater electric. I stood center stage, singing a heart-wrenching ballad, the entire audience holding their breath. And then it happened. 2 figures stood up, holding a large, sloppily made sign. Even from the stage, I could read the words, "Laura stole our money." My heart stopped. I knew those voices anywhere. My parents. "She's a thief," my father shouted. "She tricked her aunt and stole our inheritance." The spell of the performance shattered. Whispers spread through the crowd, turning into confused murmurs. My co-stars froze, unsure what to do. I stood there, frozen under the spotlight, feeling like that scared 19-year-old girl all over again. But only for a moment. As security rushed to remove my parents and the stage manager tried to calm the crowd, something inside me snapped into place. This was my stage. My life. My moment. I stepped forward, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for this interruption," I said, my voice steady. "Unfortunately, those people are my parents. They have been harassing me for years. But you know what? Their actions don't affect me anymore. Because every time I step on this stage, I am living my dream. And no one can take that away from me." The theater fell silent. Then slowly applause started. It grew louder and louder until it became a roar, drowning out my parents' angry shouts as security led them away. We finished the show, and it was one of the best performances of my life. Every note, every step felt like an act of defiance, my way of proving that I belonged there. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Enough was enough. It was time to end this once and for all. We went to court, armed with years of proof, social media posts, threatening messages, witness statements about what had happened at the theater. The case was clear. The judge issued a restraining order against my parents, legally blocking them from contacting me or coming near my performances. It was finally over. In the years that followed, my career reached new heights. I traveled the world, performing in cities I had only dreamed of visiting. Every new stage, every new audience was an adventure. My parents and brother became distant memories, faces I might pass on the street without a second glance. They were no longer part of my story. Instead, I built a new family, fellow performers, true friends who stood by me no matter what, and fans whose lives I touched with my music. And at the heart of it all was the memory of a woman who once saw a spark in a young girl and did everything she could to help it grow into a fire.